But I wanted to begin by acknowledging country. So I'm on the Quandamooka coast, the Quandamooka land, the Yagara and Turrbal people. It's their lands and waters now known as Brisbane. And just behind me actually is the North Stradbroke Island, Minjerribah. And not exactly right behind me, but a little bit across the water. So I live in Cleveland on this eastern side of Brisbane. And yes, we are in lockdown at the moment. But I also want to acknowledge the countries from where you're calling in from. So if you'd like, you could let us know what country you're in. You could type it into the chat. And Michelle, you've got it there in your name. So you're on Ghana land, thank you. But we wanted to welcome you to this session to provide for you a bit of background and a bit of understanding about Deep Collaboration and the two-day program that's coming up in May. And the two-day program is part of a suite of learning that Collaboration for Impact are putting together to bring some learning that happens in an online environment or in a teaching environment, but this learning comes from the groundwork that Collaboration for Impact are doing out there as they are helping collaborations on the ground in a number of places, in embedded support, but also in coaching support for people who are trying to work out these collaborations on the ground in various contexts. And at Collaboration for Impact, the whole vision and hope for Collaboration for Impact is that we create an equitable and inclusive society where people, place, and planet thrive. And Collaboration for Impact over a number of years has been working in the area around how First Nations and other multicultural Australians work together. And as a result of that work and as a result of the number of years of seeing that this is actually a really critical point of leverage, a critical point for Australia to break through in collaboration, that it's one of those issues that we can't go further into the future without having the opportunity to work more deeply on how First Nations and other multicultural Australians work together. So we've come to this point over a number of years, and I'm glad to see you there, Mr. Hornsey, joining us, because John was also part of a particular process that came through the journey of the last 10 years or so, 15 years or so. And we had a book that we put together called Lost Conversations. And Lost Conversations really was our attempt to try and find new ways of working together. We needed to find a new way that black and white Australians, as we called them at that point, we were just like, how do we do this work? How can we stay in partnership, stay in collaborations longer to get more skin in the game, to learn more and have a deeper connection around the risk and reward that's required for us to do this work together. And so we did the book called Lost Conversations. And as a result of Lost Conversations coming into existence, a lot of people were like, oh, thank goodness you're naming some of these dynamics, some of these patterns that happen, some of these ways that we find as a barrier, a struggle for us to work through. And the Lost Conversations work then sparked a whole broader investigation into kind of, so what skills can we cultivate? What skills can we teach? What skills can we begin to impart that can help people work through collaborations like this? So this is part of Collaborations for Impact's core strategy. It's come from a 10 to 15 year journey around our deepening of our knowledge and our working together, working alongside each other. And it now comes to a point where we prototyped a number of ways of how to do this last year. And we're really excited that we're able to put together a 2-day program that will bring about some more learning in this space and give us an opportunity to reflect on our practice and think about how we might apply this in the world around us. So I'm just going to share with you a PowerPoint. You have to bear with me. I know it's been a whole year working on Zoom, but I still have to work through carefully, how do I do this screen sharing properly? So deep collaboration. So first of all, we would want to address the question, so what is deep collaboration? What are we actually talking about when we're trying to understand what is collaboration? Now, this continuum of collaboration, or collaboration continuum that you see on screen, is used by Collaboration for Impact to try and convey the understanding that as we are trying to work together, there's a pathway and a continuum of how we increase the amount of investment and work and relationship work with each other, all the way leading up to collective impact. So this is used as a scale to help us locate where we would sit on the ground as people trying to work together. And the part that I'd like us to draw our attention to is this one here, around coordinate and collaborate. So in the coordinate understanding, this is where organizations systemically adjust and align their work with each other for greater outcomes. It can mean co-location, so they are working alongside each other. They're finding ways to really say, we can actually coordinate our efforts and start to do what you do well and what I do well, and we can feel ourselves being able to do this work together to make more impact. But then in collaborate, it's a longer term interaction based on shared mission, goals, shared decision, and makers and resources. And so what you're doing is you're sharing the reward, but you're also sharing the risk. And in that space between collaborate and coordinate, what we find is that what we are talking about in deep collaboration is that there can often be a more shallow form of collaboration between First Nations and other multicultural Australians that sits somewhere between coordinate and collaborate. It sits somewhere between organisations sitting alongside each other, or participants, actors on the ground sitting alongside each other, not really heavily invested in each other, and then this longer term interaction. And that shallow form of collaboration is one of the reasons why we found ourselves in the writing of Lost Conversations, that we would reach a point at which we would go, yeah, this is normally where we'd leave the room. This is normally the point, the barrier in which we'd say, okay, that's enough. I think I'm going to step out from here, because we'd find that sense of transactional, lower levels of trust with each other in the shallow form of collaboration. The deep collaboration is trying to stake its claim to sit outside of not just regular collaboration, but actually deeper collaboration in terms of the work that has to be done with First Nations and other multicultural Australians. So we are attempting, and we're actually practicing, a deeper form of engagement in the moving through the barriers that previously had been set up. So our task is to move from a more shallow collaboration into a deep collaboration. So the kind of elements that sit in a shallow collaboration would be that there are kind of technical or transactional relationships. There's a lack of shared understanding. There are lower levels of shared risk and reward, and there are lower levels of trust. And this is a classic situation where many people can find themselves in working on the ground in these collaborations, where you find yourself knowing that you need to work together, knowing you have to work together, but just not having enough of the shared understanding and not enough of the levels of trust to really move through the barriers that present themselves as we work across race and power. And in a deep collaboration, what we are proposing is that because we're intentionally deepening our relationships And because we're building a greater shared understanding over time and making deliberate and intentional steps to increase the levels of shared risk and reward and increasing our levels of trust through the practice of deep collaboration, we are saying that this work allows us to move through a much deeper form of collaboration, because we are moving to this end, to this part of the continuum. So this is just a snapshot of how deep collaboration sets itself out in terms of its 5 steps. Now, these aren't 5 steps that are necessarily sequential. You know, you can't do step 1 until you've finished, you can't do step 2 until you've finished step 1. This is not a sequence like that, but what it is a way of identifying that these 5 steps, you can't get to step number 5, working on hotspots, without having a sufficient understanding and working and practice in steps 1 to 4. So while it's not necessarily sequential, it is the reality that you can't work at the level of working on hotspots until you've had the chance to understand the other steps. But these 5 steps they're on our website, and they outline the way that we would move from a lost conversation to a new conversation, and how we would design and practice the collaborative work on the ground by being able to understand these 5 steps. The 2-day program, what the 2-day program does is it focuses on the fundamentals. This learning journey for deep collaboration is a way to try and create a diagram. Imagine that you're looking from above at a waterhole, a body of water there. And the more shallow area in the light green is the open access and free materials that are on the platform. That's where we can, put our feet in the water. We can step into the shallows, if you like, of the water and be able to begin to understand more about deep collaboration. And that area is out there and it's for free. And then we have this other area, which is a little bit deeper now, and that's the 2-day program, the 2-day program coming up in May. And that focus of the 2-day program is on the fundamentals, on that very first, the very first part of the steps. And then we have another program in the second half of this year, which is a much deeper dive into the 5 steps themselves. And that's over a 6-day program. It's an intensive program, and it's designed so that we will have an opportunity for some 6 days spread over a couple of weeks, over a couple of months, sorry. So this focus here for the 2-day program is on the fundamentals, that first part of these steps. So we're going to be making sure that we've got an understanding of the core concepts and of the theories and histories. And we're going to begin to look at how we might apply this in our own context. How would we apply a different way of thinking about collaboration? How would we apply a different way of understanding that would help us to improve our work, whether we are a facilitator, whether we are a leader, a team leader, or whether we are someone in the system that we are part of, the context we are part of, that we're just trying to make a difference, trying to nudge forward the relationship of the collaboration. How would we have an understanding of these core concepts and then begin to apply them? So the core concepts within deep collaboration sit across a range they're built on a range of underpinning theories and ideas and ways of working. But we've categorized the 3 different ways in which you can see the core concepts, and they are in perspective, power, and patterns. And perspective is the way we see and interpret. Power refers to the types of power and uses of power, and patterns is about the patterns of behavior. Now, under perspectives, in deep collaboration, we talk about 3 key lenses. We often refer to them as balconies, the 3 different levels. And if you like, the top level, the top balcony is the one where we can look at systems or the context. And so imagine being able to stand at the top of the hill or on a very tall building and being able to see a lot more of the context in which you're working. You can see the patterns. You can see how different things relate to each other and how some things they don't even know about each other, sorry. So we talk about that from a systems balcony for a context balcony. And then we need to look at the next one, which is around the role. So this is the role that you take up in the system. This is the role that you have, that you are an actor in. So you are part of that thing that you were just looking at, and you're taking up a role there. So how do you understand the perspectives that you have and the way you interpret from that role? And then in deep collaboration, it is interpersonal development. So we need to look at the balcony of self, this balcony or this context, this lens that lets us look at the personal work we need to do. The other two elements of perspective are cultural intelligence, the values and culture that we have inherited and that we bring with us into the collaborations, as well as the personal and professional experience. Whether you are close to this work or whether this is new to you, your own personal experience and your own professional experience, they impact the way that you see and interpret. The other thing then around this, the key core concepts are power and the types and uses of power. So in the 2-day program, we'll be looking at the types of power, uses of power, identifying power in self and others, and identifying power imbalances and inequities. We've got to work with the reality of that imbalance in order for us to be more wise in the way that we do the collaboration. And we'll be starting to work with power in groups. We'll be just beginning to practice what that looks and feels like. And the final point there in power, and this is a critical one, we will be working through understanding the 5 key power roles, and we talk about them as symptoms because they are symptoms from a diagnosing point of view. We can diagnose that something is not quite right because these symptoms keep showing up. And we talked about this in Lost Conversations. And for example, we talk about a particular key power role as being a gatekeeper. And gatekeepers often get referred to in the negative, but what we look at in this program is that we look at how that these roles, these symptoms are both can show up negatively and positively. Because while we can look at the gatekeeper and say, okay, you're shutting us out or you're closing us off, we can also then begin to understand what is the honourable thing that the gatekeeper is holding. What are they protecting? How are they keeping things safe by not allowing people to get in there? So we can start to work with that role. And role theory is really important in both power and patterns, because role theory as an understanding helps us to look externally and to not be personal with it, and to start saying, okay, if that's a role there that someone is playing as a gatekeeper, how can I work with that role, as opposed to what we too often see, which is, I'm going to attack that person. I'm going to, get stuck into that person rather than look at the role. So this is part of what we'll look at when we are looking at this core concept of power. Finally, patterns, the patterns of behaviour. So we're going to be looking at how we can develop the skills to improve the way we can identify repeat behaviours. Why do these things keep turning up? Why is it that after so many years we see these same patterns occurring? What is it about that? How can we address that? We'll be exploring how to work with those patterns, but also importantly, how to avoid getting caught in it. How do I stop playing out the same role over and over and over again? Or how can I help someone else to see that they are playing out a role over and over again? And again, we'll be using the 5 key power roles, the symptoms, to navigate what we call role fluidity. And that's the ability for you to step into a role, but also the ability for you to step out of a role. When can I take up the role of gatekeeper? When can I leave it alone? And that practice is part of what we are starting to work with, are starting to starting to introduce and then hopefully better understand and then apply in the 2-day program. So that's all for that now, so I'll stop sharing there. And that was a way to, I guess, give a bit of a snapshot around the terrain of where Deep Collaboration sits, why it sits in that way, what it's seeking to perform, what it's seeking to impart as knowledge, and also to bring about a bit of understanding about what might be entailed in the 2-day program. So before we move any further, I just want to see, are there any questions that you might have at this time? Thank you very much for that. I think certainly I agree with you that a lost conversation is around First Nations and many, many other multicultural expressions that are here in Australia. And often, if I heard you correctly, the triangle was also referring to how it connects with, say, the dominant white culture. Is that what? Yeah, okay. So I thought that. I just wanted to check that. So this work has an opportunity to delve more deeply in how to do collaborations with First Nations people. And so in doing so, while it was initially framed as between black and white when we were writing Lost Conversations, because that's the most popular forms of collaborations that we were working with, we have deliberately named it as First Nations and other multicultural Australians, because we knew it needed to open up to this whole notion that if we think culturally, then we are able to do collaborations with First Nations better. And so that means that for my fellow British descendants and European descendants who just say, look, I'm just a white Aussie, I don't know, it gives them an opportunity to go, let me think through a cultural lens about who I am, where I've come from, what's my background, it's important where your grandparents are from. How do I bring that into a collaboration? Because that actually will help the forms of collaboration when you're working with First Nations. And I think that there is a great opportunity for collaborations between, so-called ethnic communities and First Nations communities, because we have an ability to not only talk about our experiences in dominant culture, but our experiences just across cultures with each other. So that's it's exciting, Zalika, for you to be part of this dialogue. So I look forward to having those types of conversations. With regard to the question around the First Nations experience, so we will be in this part of the program, the 2-day program, it will really be looking at how do we gain an understanding of the concepts of deep collaboration and start to apply them to where we work and the context in which we live and work. And some of those will be coming from First Nations communities, First Nations peoples, but others will be from people who are like, look, I know this work is important, I do this work, but I want to increase my skills in being able to do this. And I often have been in conversations and sometimes coaching conversations with people around, it is important that we strike the balance between stepping back to allow First Nations, but also leaning in, because we need people to bring their power, experience, and knowledge to do this work together. So we've always got to be, and I think if you might remember, John, we talked about this as a dance in Lost Conversations. We're always doing a dance back and forth and with each other, trying to figure out how do we use power, how do we use our experience, how do we use our knowledge and access to support the kind of transformation we want to see. And so we need people to not relinquish power and say, okay, I'm just going to let First Nations, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander people run it. But we also need people to, in addition to that, we need people going, how can I step in? How can I do my piece? How can I take up my role and work with my role? So, John, you'll recognize a number of people in this video. This is these are for First Nations practitioners, people who are on the ground doing work, and they're talking about how the practice of deep collaboration, their exposure to the work of deep collaboration has impacted, or they've been able to take it up and use it. So thanks, Michelle, when you're ready.
The whole platform of deep collaboration is sort of this culmination of so many of the issues and the themes that came through our work and working across different. And it's also it's deliberately broad so that you can pick and choose the tools that are appropriate.
Deep collaborations helps to demystify conflict and create pathways through gridlock in a way that brings us to good change.
This deep collaboration work, I think, is good to start to grow understanding and to bring understanding on a grassroots level for those kinds of conversations to happen.
And I think deep collaboration offers such a wonderful and helpful framing for the conversations, those really important conversations that need to be had. I'm talking with people about some of the language around the deep collaboration steps, talking about rank, talking about shared values and purpose, and trying to kind of open up some of the ways that deep collaboration processes will be of such value in those really tough, really challenging conversations in a kind of everyday way. And so with a small group of women, we talk about helplessness and hopelessness. And then we talk about stories from recent and further past. And we identify that, to me, sounds like power right there. And it's a kind of reframing of people's roles in their own lives that they have already taken up, but may not quite see them in the same way.
I guess owning my own power and acknowledging that actually I probably have more than I realise in certain contexts. It means that I have an increased level of self-awareness that I can then use to apply to, the outcome that we're trying to achieve.
Sometimes there's a temptation when there's conflict is to retreat into a trench and then, hide your head and avoid conflict. But sometimes when we lean in and press in, and when there's a shared purpose that we're both trying to, you and the opposing other are trying to realise, it's sometimes an invitation to lean in and to sit in the tension longer than you ordinarily would for a greater goal or a greater outcome, and to learn something about yourself and about the other person and the goals that you're trying to realise.
Yeah, so I guess the complex stuff is never fun, and it can be quite draining, and it's heavy work. It's heavy, it's a heavy load. But now that we've sort of got some more tools and pragmatic things that can help us through, I'm finding it makes my work in either home community or paid work that much easier because I've got more tools to draw on.
The part that excites me the most is that we've come to a stage where we can build the competencies of others, and that we broaden the bandwidth of change agents that are competent to enter into some of these challenging spaces with a shared set of tools and a shared set of language.
I'm conscious that now there will hopefully be many more voices and perspectives to bring to this through deep collaboration, which is what that platform will enable, and that it will continue to grow. And I really hope that people access that resource with open hearts and open minds, and that can be really useful in their work, whatever it is, and wherever they are on their own journey with this stuff as well. If it's still fairly new, or if they're experienced practitioners, that they still can gain something from it, and also, then also add their voice to that.
I want to be able to leave some sort of legacy and in changing the narrative from the grassroots level, from middle management right up to the strategic high level thinking, and being able to influence on all levels. And I want to be able to work and build the movement with like-minded people.
It's really heartening to see this come to fruition, and it's interesting that it's also at a time when the conversation is much more evident in society about black-white relations and about, all those really significant issues that are facing our mob, like incarceration, which are always front and centre for us, but are often not front and centre for others.
I look at the world today and I see us more polarised than we have ever been before in history. And I'm not sure if that's just the way media plays it out, but I often wonder what things could be if we are able to identify a shared purpose and a shared pathway. My aspiration, hopefully, is that people might find new ways to navigate tough spaces with the tools that we've discovered and have come to embrace with deeper collaboration.
We need to invite people in. We need to find ways to invite people in to those conversations in order for us to get further, to get to better with and for other people.
So folks, that's a bit of a snapshot around what deep collaboration is, where it's come from, what we're seeking to achieve through an exploration around perspective, power and patterns in the upcoming 2-day workshop. So it's a number of weeks away, but we want to give people an opportunity to start doing some work as soon as possible. The work is going to be online, and on those 2 days, the online sessions there'll be a morning online session, and then there will be a break around the lunchtime. But that break is the opportunity to do some individual reflection work. And then there'll be an afternoon session in small groups, and then afternoon session with all of us. So that will be the rhythm of the 2 days, the 25th and 26th of May. Now, for those of you with a keen memory for dates, and you're already looking at the calendar in terms of First Nations events, you'll know that the 27th of May is the start of Reconciliation Week. So we are there right on the eve of Reconciliation Week, having a conversation about how to deepen our relationships together, how to explore a more deep and full way of doing collaboration between First Nations and other multicultural Australians. Thanks for sharing in the chat there, Michelle, for the full details on enrolment for the 25th and 26th of May. And as part of that, I'd like to be able to say that there will be a discount code, a promo code for a 10% discount. And what you'll need to do as you log in to register, type in DC intro as part of the code, and you'll receive a 10% discount on the price of the course. So folks, I really want to encourage you, if you've got an inclination for this work, if you are already in a collaboration and you want to deepen your understanding about how do I improve my collaborative skill between First Nations and other multicultural Australians, what is it that I can do to help to rethink, to help to identify ideas around shifting the dynamics that I see playing out in front of me, then this program is for you. We'll be looking at the perspective, the power, and the patterns that turn up in the conversations, in collaborations between First Nations and other multicultural Australians. Please take the time to go to the website, www.deepcollaboration.org, have a look around, and if you are interested in this program, go to the link for the course on the 25th and 26th of May, register and start doing the pre-work. And I look forward to seeing you on the 25th of May. Thank you.